Welcome back to another episode of Litigious. I'm Scott Peterson. Joanna is here with me always. This is the podcast dedicated to common sense discussion of legal stories in the news. Reminder, this podcast is brought to you by DeRazio Peterson, a plaintiff's side serious and catastrophic injury law firm and employment discrimination law firm in New York, also in Massachusetts and Vermont. If you have questions, reach out to us via our website, DeRazioPeterson.com, or on Instagram at DeRazioPeterson. If you have questions for the podcast, reach out to us on Instagram at Litigious Podcast. Thanks as always for listening, and feel free to share, like, subscribe, and do all the things. Let's get right to it. There's a number of stories in the news this week. First off, being a settlement in a Tennessee lawsuit arising out of a man who was jailed after making a post on Facebook following the shooting of Charlie Kirk last year. So the backstory here is that the gentleman, Larry Bushart, who was a retired police officer in Tennessee, made a post on social media last September, including a meme that allegedly joked about Kirk's killing. In particular, one of the memes he posted featured a quote from President Trump saying, "We have to get over it," which referenced a shooting at Iowa's Perry High School in 2024, and those were President Trump's comments afterwards. Mr. Bushart reposted or posted the meme and said, "This seems relevant today." Apparently, there's quite a bit of backlash in his community, and as a result, he was arrested after he refused to take the post down and spent 37 days in jail before felony charges against him were dropped. He then went on to file a lawsuit, which we'll talk about in a second, against the jurisdiction or the municipality that arrested him and put him in jail for 37 days. And that lawsuit was just settled for $835,000. So why don't we talk about why this is a problem for the jurisdiction arresting someone for a Facebook post. I will tell you their justification at the time was that they claimed that he was making threatening posts regarding shooting a school because he quoted President Trump in reference to a prior school shooting. Um, Seems like a stretch to
I,
me.
I mean, like,
Let me just preface it. I don't think it's appropriate for anyone to make jokes online when somebody is shot, whether you agree with them or not. But that's not really the point here.
yeah, I mean, we had a couple podcasts where we talked about a lot of people losing their jobs in light of things that they said after Charlie Kirk was killed. I do feel that sort of in hindsight, there was a little bit of like a collective psychosis or something after that happened because people had a real disproportionate reaction to, yes, is it offensive to make those comments? Did we very consistently say that we thought that for the most part, if people lost their jobs, especially if they worked for private employers, they were going to be out of luck, whether, you thought it was fair or not. But that being said, I mean, that's the only situation that I can recall where in recent memory where someone has died and people, made some negative comments about them and it set off some gigantic firestorm. I mean, we all know that, our own president doesn't have nice things to say about people when they die tragically. And we just kind of are like, okay, well, this is what we're used to at this point. But this situation, people got so many employment consequences. This was, I think, one of the only, if not the only example of someone who actually got arrested for what they said. I agree with you. I think it's a huge stretch to have taken his post as being a threat. He basically posted something that our own president said in relation to a school shooting, which a lot of people were sort of bringing up some, irony at that time. Um, so yeah, so I mean, this is a First Amendment violation. That would be a 1983 case typically that you would sue, you could potentially sue them under your state constitution as well, but under the federal law, you would sue a local government under 42 USC 1983, which is the statute that gives us a cause of action for having our constitutional rights violated by the state. So yeah, I mean, you know, he sat in jail for 37 days. That seems like it's worth $800,000 to me.
Yeah, I think that's the issue because well, first of all, there's a couple things. One is I think the for anyone listening, the distinction is important between personal civil consequences and the consequence of the government throwing you in jail for something you say. That's the reason for the First Amendment.
Right. That's
Uh,
like exactly,
yeah,
people say First Amendment a lot or free speech a lot, and it's a very overused term, but this is exactly
this
what it
this is what you
means.
mean when you say First Amendment. It means you can say what you want, and the government's not going to throw you in jail, absent very, very, very extreme circumstances. Point two is even if they were justified for the sake of argument in believing that he was a threat, there's no way it took them 37 days to figure out that he wasn't. So it's clearly an overstretch, and the fact that it was settled what appears to be relatively quickly means somebody looked at this with objective legal eyes and said, "You have a serious problem. You should settle this because you're not going to win if this ever goes to trial." So it seems like the right outcome, and it seems like the type of thing that is a good precedent to set because regardless of whether I would hope most people don't agree that you should be making snide comments about somebody when they're killed. However, I think no matter how you feel about it, we should all hope that if we were to make the mistake or one of our family members or friends were to make that mistake, they wouldn't get thrown in jail for it. So this is the kind of thing that protects people across the aisle. And many of the cases that you learn about in law school about constitutional rights being protected involve situations where people did things that you don't agree with. And it's important that people remember that the reason we have the protections we have is because bad people or people doing bad things got protections and set the precedent for it. So this is just another example of that. We may not agree with what he said, may not think it was appropriate, but he certainly didn't belong in jail for it.
Right. And in terms of what you said, in terms of the constitutional law, I mean, that's very true. Like the Miranda case is a really famous example of like a completely depraved person, but what came out of it was some important precedent. There was the Supreme Court case that struck down the death penalty for kids under 18 is like what the kids did in that case is completely disgusting and depraved. But they sometimes they use those examples on, sort of on purpose. And the only other thing I'll say about this is I think this is another sort of cautionary tale about knee-jerk reactions because I think that, I mean, slightly in defense of whatever police department arrested this guy, my understanding is that residents had called in sort of complaints. And this kind of goes back to my like collective psychosis that happened after Charlie Kirk was shot because everybody under the sun was like reporting people to their employers and doing this and that. And people sort of caved into that pressure without actually thinking it through. And we had talked about on another episode a professor who had probably some First Amendment protection, but also had some protections because they were tenured, who got fired and ended up being reinstated with a six-figure settlement. So these are just also cautionary tales of just not capitulating to like a public frenzy in the moment without thinking about whether the person that you're arresting or the person you're firing has any rights, and also whether you're applying your standards evenly because people, certainly do not apply, these standards evenly.
No
Especially,
way.
and I think that is a perfect example of a situation where people did not apply their standards, equally.
Yeah, and it's just one final point to something you touched on, which is it's important that the people in these decision-making roles give themselves a chance to press pause before making the decisions, whether it's a CEO of a company or a sheriff or a district attorney or whomever makes those decisions, because they're the ones who have to ultimately deal with the consequences. If people are banging down your door telling you how upset they are, you listen to them, but you also don't have to immediately react, which it seems like is probably what happened here. So, moving on, this JP Morgan case it just gets stranger, more and more strange every week. Those who did not listen last time may be aware there's a big case making its way through the finance world. A couple of weeks ago, a former banker at JP Morgan Chase sued the company, claiming that he was essentially a sex slave of his what I believe he was his supervisor, and making all sorts of allegations with respect to her, forcing him to engage in sexual relationship with her, uh, or risk losing promotions and advancement within the company. There was a massive fallout after the article was published. And this week, it was reported that the executive, Lorna Hajini, is suing him, the former banker, whose last name is Rana, for defamation. She's accusing him of completely fabricating claims that she used and abused him, and according to articles, alleged that Rana, who the 35-year-old finance professional, had previously lied about his father dying in order to get time off of work, orchestrated a months-long campaign of false accusations that torched her career, damaged her reputation, and turned her life into a global tabloid spectacle. Her lawyers also claim that he peddled lies that she was a racist sexual predator, aiming to destroy her reputation. They also allege that he made similar sexual harassment claims in a previous job, although the reporting I read didn't independently confirm that. Um, in addition, they're claiming that he had initially sought a payout of up to 20 million, more than $20 million from JP Morgan, had refused an offer of $1 million before making his allegations public. And the narrative seems to be shifting a little bit here. I will say that his lawyer, Rana's lawyer, said, quote, defamation requires that a statement or statements must be false. Truth is an absolute defense. Mr. Rana's statements are true. They will be proven in a court of law. So this thing is getting nasty and messy. It's not, I guess, not surprising that she would file this claim, but this is, you don't want to talk about, airing dirty laundry. This is the way to do it. Although in her case, I'm not sure if she had any other choice but to do this, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, if her case is based only on his lawsuit, I don't think it's going to be successful because New York has an absolute privilege for claims that are made within the context of a lawsuit. And that's accurate even if the claims are ultimately proven to be false. So I don't know if and I am not sure if he's been going around talking to the press. I didn't think he was.
I don't think
Um,
his lawyers probably wouldn't let him.
so I don't know how successful this will be, even if it turns out that his claims are false. Um, but yeah, it's a very messy thing. I mean, I understand, people I think are using defamation cases a lot more frequently, it seems like. We're going to talk about the Baldoni and Lively update after this, but that's another case where he had a lot of, a bunch of different types of defamation cases, extortion, things like kind of similar context. And they were all dismissed in New York State and even under like the California law too. So I don't know. I don't necessarily see this being a successful defamation lawsuit. Like I think we said in the last episode, I like to give a legitimate, plaintiff's firm the benefit of the doubt that they're not going to take, a completely fabricated case. I do think it's a little interesting. Like usually a lawyer, especially, I don't know if you were in court or doing like a cross-examination or talking to a jury or something, you would not vouch for your client's truthfulness. I know that like sounds sort of counterintuitive, but typically like an attorney does not say like, do you know what I mean? Am I articulating that right? You're not supposed to like vouch for your,
Yeah,
I don't know, like there's contexts where you don't necessarily phrase it that way.
here's
Like,
how I've approached this. This makes me think of a trial I had several years ago where I represented a guy who had reported illegal removal of asbestos from a school when he was working on a project and he got fired. And we had a whistleblower lawsuit and it went to trial. And it was his word against the word of his former boss and the people who worked there. And I remember during my closing argument, I addressed that with the jury and I said to them, this is you have to make the decision as to who you believe. And I sort of laid out what everybody said and why they were not credible. And I think I said, I can't make the decision before you or for you, but I believe what he's saying. I think he's being honest. And I mean, I gave my assessment of it, and they believed him because we won. But
I mean,
um,
I would say truth is a defense is defamation, and we're gonna, prove our case or whatever. I don't know. I thought that was interesting though that they said that, like, this is true. I mean, I hope so, but you're the lawyer talking to the press. So you're the one who this is how lawyers get themselves in trouble because
yeah, I think you could be a little.
you're speaking outside of the litigation now.
I think you could probably frame that a little more carefully. Probably what you're saying is you could easily, as a lawyer, say, "I we have absolutely no reason to believe whatsoever, based upon the information that we have, that what he's saying is not accurate." Right? I mean, that's like a little more nuanced.
I don't know. I like to say my complaint speaks for itself.
Yeah,
That's what
I don't.
I don't know, but
Yeah.
I'm not like a celebrity lawyer.
Well,
Um,
anyway, yeah, I mean, your point is interesting about that. A lot of this, most of this stuff is protected in the context of the litigation privilege. Um, and I said before, she may not have any other choice but to file the defamation claim. But I also think you're right that the defamation cases are sort of being used as like a sword and shield in these kinds of cases. Maybe not always accurately, but I don't
I mean,
know.
if the case is completely fabricated, as she's saying, I mean, you could ask for sanctions or say that it's frivolous or, you know, something
Yeah,
like
but
that. I don't know.
you're never going to get sanctions, I wouldn't think, or a determination that's frivolous be, because it's he said, she said, right? So I don't think the
Well, if he
lawyer could get
completely
sanctioned
lies
for.
and she proves it, isn't, I mean, that's wasn't that
Yeah, I
something?
guess. I guess you
Perjury?
could say.
I don't
I guess
know.
the judge could sanction the client. I don't think the judge would sanction the lawyer if the lawyer had done some diligence and took their client's word for it and they
Yeah,
filed it.
no, I agree. I agree. I
Um,
just don't, I didn't see that he had been, blabbing this all over the place that would support him having made the statements outside of litigation.
yeah.
Because there's lots of, I mean, that's like a pretty settled, like, legal principle in New York State that there's an absolute privilege for that. I just was
But
looking at a case from 2025 that somebody sued someone for sexual assault and he counterclaimed the defamation, and the court was like, no, absolute privilege.
well, I don't know. It'll be interesting. I would like. I mean, we handle cases like this. Discovery is usually pretty interesting in these cases. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out in discovery to the extent any of it's public. There's a New York County case. Maybe I'll get lucky enough that I'll be in court in New York City when this case goes, if it ever goes to trial, and get to watch some of it. But
It is
we'll
like
see.
super interesting to see how how it shakes out because it is like a weird situation where although this has kind of happened to Blake Lively too, like we're going to segue into that, like I keep seeing the banker who is the alleged victim being referred to as like he's like the bad guy in all of the press. I've seen him described as like disgraced banker, and like the only real information that we have of why he would be disgraced is by making I mean, and there might be a little bit of like reverse sexism going on in this situation.
I think it also depends on where you're reading the stories. I mean, I read an article from the New York Post today that referred to him as a disgraced banker, or
Maybe we
former
read
banker.
about the same
But
article.
the New York Post is not going to be friendly to a plaintiff in that kind of a case. They're a more it's a publication that would more likely to me seem to err on the side of the bank in that situation. But who knows? All right, we'll keep on that one. There'll be definitely more to report back on that. All right, segueing into the Lively Baldoni case, which we've been talking about forever, arising out of this It Ends With Us movie litigation. So, according to articles and reports, uh, although Blake Lively appears to have received no financial payout in her settlement with Ben Baldoni and the Wayfarer parties, this legal battle is continuing. In a court filing a couple of weeks ago, attorneys for Baldoni's Wayfarer group argued that Lively had dismissed her three remaining claims without them paying a cent, despite her having sought 300 million in damages originally. But Lively's folks say in response, hey, this was not about money. This was about exposing bad actors who are harming others. Uh, Looks like we're starting to flirt with probably getting beyond the bounds of whatever their settlement agreement was. Um, They go on to say she didn't settle her claims until the documents exposing these bad actors behind smear campaigns were made public. And is trying to breathe life into groundbreaking statute designed to protect survivors from retaliatory lawsuits. The one remaining issue appears to be whether she can recover attorney's fees under California Civil Code, a law or provision that was meant to protect people who report sexual harassment, discrimination, or retaliation. Um, so it's interesting. We talked about this before. I had thought that they would have resolved this issue in their settlement, but apparently they had not. And so this issue is still out there as to whether she will get attorney's fees for any part of this case. Um, and so where are we on this?
Yeah, so when we talked the last time about this, there was nothing on the docket yet. So now there is. So I looked at it today. So there's the stipulation of settlement, and it does specifically exempt out that she is not releasing her. She has already a pending motion for attorney's fees that are basically directed towards a pretty limited part of the case. So going back in time, months ago, Baldoni's defamation, basically all of his counterclaims in the case were dismissed. One of his counterclaims was a defamation claim against her, as well as Ryan Reynolds and some of the other people involved in the case. But basically, when that defamation claim against Blake Lively was dismissed, she had the right under a California statute to request her attorney's fees. And, I would say her attorney's fees limited to their effort in dismissing that particular defamation claim, not like her attorney's fees, that the gazillion dollars that she spent litigating this case this whole time, but her attorney's fees on that particular claim. And so New York doesn't have this, but California, there's actually legislation pending in New York, but it hasn't passed yet. California has a specific statute that protects claims of sexual harassment, sexual assault from defamation lawsuits. That also includes a attorney fee provision for the person who is successful in that situation. And it is intended that you will sort of invoke this statute at the motion to dismiss stage, which, for people who aren't totally familiar with like the procedure of a lawsuit, a motion to dismiss is a motion you can make at the very beginning of the case after you are served with a complaint, whereas the defendant, you can say, even if we take everything that's in this complaint as true, they have not pleaded a legal cause of action. And you're supposed to do this in this privilege context in a defamation case, in the sexual assault context, at the motion to dismiss phase, because the idea is that you don't even get involved in the litigation process. You kind of like nip it at the bud at the very beginning. Like you're not even allowed to bring this lawsuit because these
Yeah.
claims are privileged. So going back to the, JP Morgan situation, if this, woman banker who has been accused of sexual harassment files a defamation lawsuit and all of the claims were made in the context of a lawsuit, if I were his lawyer, I would be making a motion to dismiss
Yeah.
because, theoretically you could say, okay, well, everything you're saying could be true, but it doesn't matter because he had this in a legal document. So there's a privilege. So we're not even going to go down this road. So after the judge dismissed Baldoni's defamation claim, her lawyers made this motion for their attorney's fees.
Yeah.
I felt like I looked at the motion to dismiss decision. The court kind of did like a not super surprising sort of like kick the can down the road, like only decide the issues that you absolutely have to. So he dismissed the defamation claims based on like a common law privilege,
Okay.
not on the California statute privilege.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So they still have to make a determination of whether her claims fell within the protection of the California statute. And then if they did, then you can decide if you're going to get the attorney's fees or and how much they're going to be and et cetera.
All right. But st I still don't quite understand why they didn't include this in the settlement.
Oh, I totally agree. I think it's weird.
Um, when you settle lawsuits, you both parties really do try to incorporate everything so that, the matter is put to bed, so to speak.
Yeah.
So it's
Well,
unusual that you would see this.
so, yeah, I agree. And I also think so. Here's like what would have been avoided if they had settled everything, right? They would have avoided Baldoni's lawyer writing a letter to the court that told the whole universe that she got no money, which
Yeah.
I still find weird because I would think that I would have thought that would be confidential.
Yeah, agreed. It would have avoided that. It would have avoided this now back and forth that they're having where, they're sort of like posturing about what they got out of the settlement, which, like I said, my guess would be that the settlement would have had some mutual non-disparagement type language in it, which you could very quickly run up against if you were making these kinds of comments, and then, that could then lead to, sort of like a blow up of the deal, violation of the settlement, further litigation. So I don't know, it's interesting.
Yeah, I think the whole thing is very dicey. I mean, unless I'm missing something, I agree with you. I find it very strange that these like high-powered like big law lawyers did not like fully resolve this and put it to bed 100%. Because the reason why there's now all this back and forth, not only in the press still, but also in the courts, in public documents, is because Blake Lively's lawyers asked the court if they could continue briefing this issue, but they had already briefed it already. So it was in response to their letter to the court asking for more briefing that the other lawyer did what I do think is actually reasonable. As long as you're not violating the confidentiality agreement, like I do think is reasonable at a certain point to be like, can we stop what we're doing?
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like you dropped all your claims, you got no money for them. Why are you asking to keep briefing this issue that we already briefed back in like September or something? And the judge denied it. The judge said
Oh,
no
okay.
more briefs. So the whole thing is very odd to me that they would not have put this whole thing to bed because it just like I think in our practice and I would say for like by and large for anyone, the whole reason for a settlement is like let's close the door on this fiasco and move on and basically like never speak of it again for everyone's sort of mutual peace of mind. And the only thing I could think of that they would have kept this claim alive is if they thought they were entitled to like millions of dollars of attorney's fees. But the courts don't really like that. Like they don't like when these big law firms come in with like claiming like a gazillion hours to write a motion. I mean, this was a motion to dismiss. So it's at the very beginning of the case. You have a statute, you have a privilege. It's not like a totally convoluted issue. Like you're coming in there and you're saying this defamation claim should be dismissed because there's an absolute privilege or there's a reporting privilege that's like very well recognized in the law. Here's 10 cases that say that the end.
Yeah.
How much attorney fee can you possibly have? I'm sure a large
I
law firm
suspect a
can work
lot.
up
Yeah.
an astronomical attorney fee on that, but that doesn't mean the court is going to think you deserve it
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
the point that you're going to keep your case alive and in the news and continue getting like bad press and now have taken the risk of exactly what happened, which is that they disclose in a public document that you didn't get any money in the settlement.
Yeah. Interesting. Every time I think we're done talking about it, it comes back up again. So, all right. Well, we will report back when we have more information on that one. Uh, Last substantive discussion. Very sad. Not even a case yet, but I thought it would be interesting to talk about. Just reported yesterday, a 56-year-old woman in New York City was killed after she stepped into an open manhole in downtown or midtown Manhattan on Fifth Avenue near the Cartier store. Um, and the manhole belongs to Con Edison, apparently.
Oh,
Um, but apparently, according to video, according to the company, the whole cover was dislodged after a truck ran over it. Um, it was apparently dislodged for 12 minutes before she parked her car nearby, uh, stepped out of her car and fell straight into the manhole where she then was alive for a period of time. It's really just horrible. Um, what, what is that, if there is a case there, what is for her family, what does that look like?
yeah, I mean, I think with those sort of facts, it's going to be a little bit more complicated because of the amount of time that it was open, whose fault is it that it's open? I mean, I think it would be a more common scenario, and there's a ton of cases on this because we had a case with utilities and property owners and stuff like that, and those cases can get like very convoluted about whose fault it is and who, how much notice did they have and whose responsibility is it to deal with it. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's pretty, I mean, did they know? Like, did anyone know this was open before it happened? I mean, that would be kind of like, I think one of the relevant questions is just, if a truck ran it over, they probably didn't do anything wrong, the truck driver. Um,
No,
I
no.
would assume that there has to be some way of securing these things in an appropriate way that when a vehicle drives over it, which is probably happening a million times a day, that it would not dislodge that way. So maybe Con Edison or the city or somebody did something wrong in that situation. Um, and
That's
then
the
if the
question.
city, I mean, who knows? Like if people knew about this and they just like left it there and didn't put cones around it and didn't do anything, then that could be another way of handling it. But these cases are kind of harder than people may think because the city especially has a lot of layers of protection from liability in these situations. Like a lot of times they have to have what we call prior written notice, like somebody has alerted them about a problem in writing already, or they have to have affirmatively created the problem and not just, passive negligence, like you could sue a regular, private citizen or private company. So it's a little convoluted, but I gotta think somebody is gonna try to hold somebody accountable for this.
Well, I think you touched on it, but in a case when something like this happens against a private property owner, you have to establish that there was a dangerous condition, which, a manhole cover being open is a dangerous condition, and then either that they created it or that they had notice of it and within a reasonable period of time didn't do what they had to do to repair it. But I think your comment is probably the right one, which is the way to look at this would be to say if they knew, because they acknowledge in their statement that manhole covers can get displaced by heavy vehicles. So the question is, how often does that happen? What precautions did they take to ensure that it didn't happen, or if it did happen, it was something that was responded to? I mean, in a city the size of New York, I suspect it's not easy for them to immediately get something like that covered, but I don't know. So yeah, it's really sad. It's tragic. It's a bad case. It's obviously a bad story, but I thought the potential legal implications of it are interesting. I'm sure I wouldn't be surprised if something comes out of it, but time will tell as to whether, they acted appropriately or if this was some completely freak accident that couldn't have been avoided. So,
Yeah, and this would be, we've touched on this, how wrongful death cases work, but wrongful death cases have sort of two pieces of them. One is the survivor action, which is like the action that the deceased person would have had if they had not died. And then, the claim that your family could make. But for the survivor action, I mean, this is a case where that would be like a gigantic, um, claim, I think, because I mean, it's really pretty horrific when you read about this. I think she had like a pretty significant conscious pain and suffering in this situation because apparently if you fall into these things, you're like blasted with some sort of molten steam.
oh my God.
I mean, my fear would be to fall into like a colony of rats. But I didn't really think about the steam, and I think that's what killed her.
Oh my God, that's
And it's
horrible.
really horrific. So that would be a very big, because your survivor action is, what has happened to you before your death, and then the wrongful death is what has happened to your family or
Yeah.
your, heirs.
Sad case. All right. You wanted to talk about the in the media, pop culture. I'll tee it up for you here. Um, what?
I just want to say, I feel like anyone who would listen to this on a regular basis would know that every time I bring up something that is like a pop culture thing that you don't want to talk about or that you think is dumb, you say, you wanted to talk about this.
You did want to talk about it.
Yeah, I did want to talk about it because I think it's funny.
Yeah, because
Okay.
this is your
Do,
news feed.
do you want to
Um,
give the
Clavicular, who I have heard of, who is a what do you call him? A looks maxer?
looks maxer?
All
This
right.
is you have to be speaking the language of I don't even know what this is, Gen Alpha, our kids' generation, to even
I've
understand this. It's like they literally speak in different language.
I've never heard our 16-year-old or 14-year-old use the word looks maxing. I have heard them use the term mogging though. So,
Yeah.
Clavicular was arrested for purportedly inciting a fight between his girlfriend and another woman while they were in the process of discharging a firearm at a dead alligator. Was in court in Miami, in Miami-Dade County, uh, and apparently. So the background with this guy is that he spends his time talking about how important it is for men to be good looking, and
Yes. And this is a
and
whole thing.
yeah, and talks a lot about apparently how if you're not a good-looking, strong man, you know you're basically worthless. And I saw one clip of him. He's apparently a very conservative guy, but he said he would never vote for JD Vance because he was not attractive, and that he would vote for Gavin Newsom based upon looks alone. So this is what we're dealing with. And
That's actually a very funny. I don't know. I mean, I also would perceive him as being conservative. That being said, I don't know that he has like necessarily. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think he has claimed to being conservative, but I do think that sometimes he's kind of gone like back and forth on it. I mean, I think he's definitely part of the like, red pill, like manosphere kind of thing. I don't know.
I
Um,
think he should be part of the why do we care what this guy thinks about politics world.
these
So
people are literally encouraging like young men. See, we have to be aware of this because we have a teenage son to like hit themselves in the face with like a hammer
yeah,
to do
I heard it.
something to their
Yeah.
cheekbones. It is this so bizarre. What a time to
Anyway,
be alive.
he's catching a lot of flack because in a twist of irony, the judge assigned to his case is apparently better looking than he is and has mogged him according to however whatever that word means. And so he went into the courtroom and was no longer the alpha best looking person in the room because apparently, according to the internet, the judge, who is a Cuban American, I think, judge in Miami-Dade County, has him beat. So there we have it.
Yeah, I find this to be very funny. This is not the first time this has happened to him because he recently did an interview with a like Australian I don't know, interviewer. And that guy also, so I don't know if you say he mogged him or if you say he out mogged him or if saying out mogging is the same as saying ATM machine.
You're asking the wrong person.
Well, I've seen both. Babe, you have to figure this out because this is
I
like,
would say he outmogged him. He was outmogged, whatever that means. I don't
but
know.
I feel like mogging is doing it in general. Like, anyway, this has happened to this guy multiple times. I don't like these toxic, masculinity people. Like, so I find it like fantastic every time this happens to this man. So it's happened with the judge. It happened with this Australian interviewer. He was at a frat party once and like the president of the frat walked by behind him and people were like, well, there, that's the real alpha in the room. It's the, oh, and then and I think that's what like what does this MOG even stand for? Man of the group or something like that, like alpha male of the group or something like that. Would that be MOG, male of group? Yeah.
Yeah, it would be, yeah. Yeah.
All right, here. This is when Scott does not have an interest in the topic. Do you want to talk about Summer House or like Love Island or anything before we go on?
No, no, I
Your
think we're
other
good.
favorite topics, reality television?
I think we covered all the important. Now we've officially covered everything that's important in the news this week. So if there's any more mogging stories related to the law, we'll be sure to report them back. If any of our listeners have real insight into this topic, we'd really be interested to hear what you had to say.
As a
Um,
member of the legal profession, I felt proud that he was outmogged by, by one of our
yeah,
members.
and yeah, he was outmogged by in looks. We're probably not even using the term correctly, and certainly in intellect by the judge. So a big win for Jen. The judge looked like
Although
he was
the
about
judge is
my
like
age.
presiding over a shooting an alligator carcass
Yeah.
case.
The judge looked like he was maybe in his 40s, so maybe he's Gen X. Big win for Gen X if that's the case. Anyway, I think that's it for today. Anything else?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for listening. We'll be back again probably next week with some more stories in the news. Any questions, reach out to us on Instagram at Litigious Podcast. And reminder, if you have legal questions about anything that we handle, visit us at DerazioPeterson.com. We're always happy to help. And thank you again for listening.